Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening to those of you in Australia, and good morning to everybody here in Europe. First things first, I'd just like to know that everybody can hear me okay. So perhaps somebody could just note in the chat that they can hear me. I've got Danny, our IR manager, sitting here with us. Danny, do you think sound's working okay? Okay, I've got a comment that everybody can hear me. That's great. Okay, well, first of all, welcome to you all. It's great to be able to run through our updated presentation. I can see a few familiar names and some new names that have signed up to listen. This technology is a little new to us, so bear with me if there's any hiccups with the presentation. But what we'll do is I'll run you through the presentation, and that will keep to around about half an hour. And following that, we'll make sure there's plenty of time for a question and answers session. For those of you who'd like to ask any questions, either now or while I'm speaking, on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a little speech bubble with a question mark. That's the Q&A area. So if you click there, you can put a question in that chat, and we'll do our best to get through them all. You'll see that you can also upvote other people's questions, which will rank those more highly if it's something you'd like to know, and that helps prioritize some of those questions. So we have a good attendance now, and I will pull up a copy of our presentation. And ensure that is full screen. Okay, so Kingsrose. Some of you will be familiar with the company from its, let's say, previous life as a gold miner. The company's previous focus was on the Walingo project in Indonesia. The company put that into production in 2010 and operated it for 10 years. And that operation came to an end late 2020, following which the share price, unfortunately, was very low. In fact, the company was trading at below cash backing. And it is shortly after the closure of the mine that there was quite an overhaul of the company's board and management. So there were changes to the company's board which reflect a more exploration-focused strategy. And that's where I myself, in February 2021, came in to lead the company as its managing director and on this new exploration-focused path. So who are we going forwards? We are focused on discovery, on riding the value increase from making a discovery through those first few exciting drill holes to resource definition and starting to put the first economic studies around a new exciting asset. We're focused on technical excellence. We pride ourselves by having a very competent and experienced team, both at the board level and at management. We prioritize very highly our environmental and social commitments, and you'll see that as a running theme throughout this presentation. And we do our utmost to communicate transparently with our shareholders and stakeholders local to the projects. To give you just an update on the corporate snapshot, you can see here our shares on issue and our recent share price graph. Cash at hand today represents about 3.5 cents per share. We have a little over 26 million Aussie dollars in cash as of the last reporting date, and our market cap currently is roughly 40 million. So quite a small enterprise value premium to our significant cash position, which puts us in an enviable position compared to many other junior explorers, and particularly in weaker markets as we see today. It allows us to keep driving forwards with our strategy. In fact, it creates more opportunities for us in these weaker markets with no need to capital raise for the foreseeable future for Kingsrose. And when I say that, that's at least 2 to 3 years out. So the strategy for the company has a few pillars to it. First and foremost is to advance our fairly recently acquired projects in Finland and Norway. I'll come on to those in more detail. At the Wailingo project, having reinitiated exploration there during the sort of first year of my involvement with the business, we determined that it wasn't meeting our hurdles for a meaningful enough project. So we've made the decision to divest the asset there. And we recently announced that we've made progress by entering into an exclusivity arrangement with a potential buyer. And we hope that we'll be concluding a binding share purchase agreement for the sale of that project over the coming months. And at that point, we'll announce a further update, including all of the commercial terms of that transaction. In addition to our existing 2 assets in Scandinavia, we're continuing to look to bring in another asset to the portfolio. So we have a dedicated team currently working on that aspect of the business. And again, I'll provide more information on our approach there further in the presentation. So in about November last year, we closed the acquisition of a small private company called Element 46, which gave us the 100% ownership of 2 assets, Pennycat in Finland and the Porsanger project in Norway. After an extensive search for new assets, which followed quite a rigorous and strategic path, we determined that Scandinavia had all the ingredients that we were looking for in a new jurisdiction and region to get involved in. There's exceptional geology, and this can be demonstrated by some of the existing operations in the region. So Europe's largest gold mine, Kittilä, operated by Agnico Eagle, is in Finland. And then a more recent gold success, for example, Rupert Resources, who have discovered a multi-million ounce gold deposit and seen significant share price growth through that. So on the gold side, it's a great, well-demonstrated jurisdiction. But then importantly, the geology is very favorable for these future-facing critical metals such as platinum group elements, nickel, copper, and an array of other elements, including cobalt, rare earths, and lithium. And this can be demonstrated by Anglo-American's discovery of the Sakatti deposit, which is an exceptional high-grade sulfide PGE nickel copper deposit in Finland. And there are other operations mining predominantly copper and nickel in the region. A very favorable mining law, which is well laid out and we believe can be well relied on. There's clear paths for advancing projects from the exploration stage through to development and production. Favorable tax environment, and all of these things are attested to by the current interest from global mining companies in the region. So many of the major and mid-tier mining companies are operating there, along with a host of junior companies. The flagship of the 2 assets is our Pennycat project in Finland. This is located very close to the port of Kemi. And Kemi is a major industrial port in the area. It's at the northern end of the sea there, and is the major point for the timber industry to ship out timber. In addition, near the port is Outokumpu's Kemi chrome mine, which has been in operation for many years and is one of Europe's largest underground mining operations. And therefore, associated with this, we have all of the infrastructure that we would like to see to support a future mining development. And there's also a good understanding of mining and industry in this area. So Pennycat itself is a remarkable deposit that we know a lot about, considering it's still at an early stage for us in terms of our exploration. The project was explored in the late 80s and early 90s by the Finnish company Outokumpu and the Finnish state. And within our exploration tenure, there were about 100 drill holes historically drilled, although only to a shallow depth of a little over 40 meters on average. Now, the deposit type itself is, in terms of geology, what we call a layered intrusion. And layered intrusions are the style of deposit that make up almost the entirety of global platinum group metals supply. Most of this comes from the Bushveld complex in South Africa, as well as the Stillwater deposit in the US. In addition, there's significant palladium supply from Norilsk in Russia. And what is characteristic about layered intrusions is that they are very large deposits and they're very continuous in their nature. And this really assists us in understanding what we have here at Pennycat and gives us confidence in the potential of this asset. So what I'm saying here is, when you combine the style of geology, which is known for being very large and very continuous mineralized ore bodies, along with the known information we have at surface, roughly 25 kilometers of outcropping mineralized strike length of 3 mineralized reefs, which is demonstrated through the historical drilling and surface sampling. So on this map, the white dots are historical drill holes, which you can see distributed along the PV, AP, and SJ reefs. And then in addition, there are a series of colored diamonds, which represent basically surface sampling of the reefs historically. What we're seeing in these drill holes are really exceptional high grades. And we've got a couple of call-out boxes there where you can see 1.4 meters at roughly 20 grams 4E, and to the south 2.6 meters at roughly 13 grams 2E, so 4E. And just in case there was any confusion, so the term 4E or even 6E these are used in platinum group element dominated deposits, and it's essentially a addition of all of the platinum group metals, their gram per ton value. So 4E is comprised of platinum, palladium, gold, and rhodium, and 6E is those elements along with the addition of ruthenium and iridium. So as you can see from some of these call-out drill hits, what we're seeing on average is that these reefs are roughly 1.5 meters in thickness. Now, this is very typical of these types of deposits globally. In fact, many of the deposits in production in the Bushveld complex are the high-grade mineralized portion is 1 meter or even slightly less thick. However, in addition, what we see, and is very exciting on the AP reef, is what we call a ballroom. And this is a term coined from the Stillwater deposit in the US. This is the highest grade PG deposit globally. And ballrooms are where you have portions of the reef that thicken from 1 or 2 meters thick to 10 or 20 meters plus. And so here we have historical drill holes. One is noted here of 8.8 meters at just over 11 grams 4E. And we actually have a drill hole up to 34 meters thick in that area. So these thickenings of the reef are really, really significant in terms of a future mining operation where you can increase throughputs through the mill and mine very, very economically high-grade materials. Now, one of the key things we've done, some of the key things we've done in the last few months is we've managed to get hold of 30 of the historical drill holes, which are sitting in the geological archives in Finland. and we've been able to reassay those. So we've recut that core and sent it to ALS laboratories, who have independently verified the mineralized intercepts, and those have been reported in a few batches over the previous month, and have given us confidence, because in all cases the results verified historical results. And in fact, we've had some positive surprises in that two things. One, the grade of our sampling has been in the region of 10 to 20% higher than that historically stated. This may be down to better detection limits than were available in the past, but also historical sampling was very selective to what they visually believed was the mineralized portion of the deposit. So we sampled more broadly above and below the known sampled intervals, and in many cases that's broadened the mineralized area, so we're getting thicker widths than were previously recognized. And therefore these average widths that we are assuming from the historical data today of 1.5 meters may well increase as we generate more of our own data on the deposit. So all of this wealth of information verified through our drilling, we used to recently have an independent calculation of a JORC compliant exploration target. Now, this is a precursor to a mineral resource, and it is essentially a process whereby an expert in the field of these types of deposits, he came to the project, he visited the core and analyzed all of the data and determined what they believe are the minimum and the lower and upper potential ranges of a resource, of what a potential future resource, mineral resource may look like. And this resulted in a range of 21 to 32 million tons at between 4 and 7.4 grams per ton 6E, for a combined endowment of 2.8 to 7.7 million ounces. So a really significant endowment in terms of ounces, but very importantly at what appears to be the highest grade exploration project of its type globally. And that's what this graph is demonstrating. And I will take you through the graph a little more shortly, but just to go back, this exploration target was calculated on just two of the known reefs. So the PV reef and the SJ reef, where you can see essentially a colored area extending to the west, to the left of screen from the outcropping reef. This is the extent of the volume that the exploration target was calculated on the basis of. And this is extending mineralization from surface to 500 meters vertical depth, which is a little over 700 meters down dip. We did not include the AP reef because the historical data we have there is more localized in one area, and we didn't feel there was a representative enough suite of drilling. However, we do have surface sampling of the reef at very high grades over many kilometers to give us confidence that the reef does exist. However, we wanted to be conservative in this exploration target calculation. So the AP reef represents about 8 kilometers of the nearly 25 kilometers of combined strike length, and that wasn't included in this calculation. Additionally, the exploration target calculation was only taken down to 500 meters depth, and we have historical seismic data showing that this intrusion and what is believed to be the reefs extend to an excess of 1.5 kilometers down dip. And it's very common in almost all of these layered intrusion type deposits globally that they do extend for kilometers down dip. So we think it's very reasonable that this will become larger. Still, nevertheless, even with those omissions from the calculation, we have generated a very respectable size potential resource, and importantly, where it plots on this graph. So the box that is drawn to the exploration target is essentially a box defining the range of tons and grade. So on the left-hand side of the axis of the graph is grade, and along the bottom is tonnage on a log graph. We've added to this graph all of the known PGE dominant projects globally, both at the mining and the exploration and development stage. Mining projects are shown in full color, and the exploration projects are shown in a faded color. And I think you can see very clearly also from the flags that are noted with those that world supply is dominated by South Africa and Russia. Combined, these two regions make up at least 80% of the world's supply of platinum group elements. And particularly and unfortunately in the current environment, this is very applicable to us as sourcing metals from Russia is becoming more and more difficult and certainly undesirable by the rest of the world. And also in South Africa, many of these mining operations have been in operation for many years, decades in fact, and they are becoming deeper, lower grade, and less economically viable in some cases. They're also being hit with numerous local issues such as power outages and labor issues. So against that backdrop, our project really stands out. You can see here that there is quite a marked bottom in terms of grade to current production. There are very few producing operations that are less than 3 grams per ton. And it's interesting to note that almost all of the currently well-known exploration projects that are being advanced and promoted today are in the lower grade range of the 1 to 2 grams area. Now, this is an important point for a number of reasons. Firstly, those lower grades are generally only going to be economically viable as larger open pit deposits. And it's our view that with an increasing focus on the ESG and sustainability aspect of mines, financiers are going to be less and less willing to fund larger footprint projects such as these types of open pit mines. It's also going to become increasingly difficult to permit these as they become less acceptable to communities, host communities. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that global smelting capacity for PGEs has been developed and is built adjacent to predominantly the South African mines. And therefore, those smelters have been built and designed to take a feed that is of that type, higher grade, and from these layered intrusions. So again, many of these lower grade bulk tonnage projects that are of a different style of geology may not produce a concentrate of sufficient grade to be acceptable or get a premium price from existing smelters today. And this is where Pennycat really comes into its own. What we're looking at here is a unique scenario where we have it located in the excellent jurisdiction of Finland, which is a member of the EU. And the EU has a very clear EU Green Deal, and within that, an action plan on critical raw materials, which is essentially looking to support the development of domestic supply of critical metals. And the EU and the British Geological Survey have recently announced critical metals lists, and platinum group elements sit very near the top. In fact, as a more critical element than lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, etc. So it is right at the top of the EU agenda in terms of critical metals. Finland happens to consistently rank within the top 5 mining jurisdictions globally, as according to the Fraser Institute. And because of its exceptional high grades, we can be confident that we will be looking at a lower environmental impact underground operation. It's interesting to note that our deposit also starts at surface. It is outcropping. And this presents many advantages in terms of it being cheaper to explore and drill. And then if it makes it to becoming a potential mine, in terms of production, we would be able to access the ore body via a decline rather than a shaft. And as an example, one of the most significant PGE deposits that are coming online today is the Ivanhoe's Platreef deposit, which you can see just above the 3 gram per ton line. It's roughly a 4 gram ore body, and they've had to sink a nearly 1,000-meter shaft to get into the ore body, which is a significant capex item that we won't need to contend with. So this puts us in a really compelling spot, and you can just lastly see the coloured bands there, which represent the contained ounces, and you can see our exploration target essentially straddling the 5 million ounce line, with potential to grow through further exploration down dip, and showing that the AP reef does in fact warrant being included. So we're really excited about this project. As many of you will know, we are currently in a permitting process. So in order to get drill permits in Finland, and particularly where we are, which is what is defined as a European Union Natura 2000 site, this means that we need to conduct habitat and species surveys and then integrate that with a well-defined exploration program, which demonstrates that we will not have a significant impact on the local environment, and will demonstrate how we will mitigate any impacts and monitor for future disturbance of the local habitats and species. So all of that is currently underway. We have teams of surveyors in the field detailing the various habitats and flora and fauna, and this has been combined with our exploration program and will be submitted shortly for approval. So a portion of the exploration license area that we hold is being submitted within the next month, and the rest of the entire area will be submitted before the end of the year, and that's just a function of where we've completed surveys versus where they're ongoing. And essentially the permitting process is roughly 10 to 12 months. That starts with an up to 6-month process where the environmental authorities assess our documentation and provide a recommendation then to the mines department, who require roughly 4 months to approve our exploration licenses. There are numerous precedents for this being successful in country, in similar Natura 2000 areas, and we have confidence that it will be successful. But ultimately it means that the approvals will be received in roughly a year from now, and our drilling will be restricted to the period of the year when there is snow cover that protects the flora and fauna on the ground. So that means drilling seasons will extend from roughly December through to April each year. However, given we know so much about the project, we know where the ore body sits, we know exactly where we would like to drill from, we will be looking to advance this very rapidly once we can bring drill rigs onto the ground, and we expect to bring at least 3 or 4 rigs onto the project in that maiden year of drilling to rapidly drill out at least 15,000 meters and start demonstrating the exceptional grade and scale of Pennican. Just to further reiterate the point here about the value of this ore, and to allow people to compare this perhaps against, for example, a gold deposit, you can see these pie charts at the bottom. These show what the average split of the various ingredients are, the various elements, and what their ounce per ton sort of basket price would be based on a range of commodity prices that are noted in the bottom right. Important to note that there are significant potential copper and nickel credits here as well. There's a number of drill holes that have returned between 0.2 and 0.6% copper, and the same for nickel, and that wasn't included in the exploration target because it was less routinely sampled for historically. But this is another significant value add for the project as it goes forward. And in many cases, these credits essentially pay for your operating costs, and the rest is basically free cash flow. Coming on to the second asset, Porsanger in Norway. This is a very intriguing area that again has seen some on and off exploration over decades, but in various campaigns, and we believe slightly missing the true opportunity. So in this area, there are 2 known outcropping intrusions, and these are called the Porsvann and Karenhaugen intrusions. And these have been drilled historically, and you can see in the cross-section and bullet points there some of the results at Porsvann. And these include drill holes from 43 to almost 75 meters thick intervals of roughly 1 to 1.5 grams combined platinum and palladium grades. And we see similar similar results at Karenhaugen as well. In addition to this, In the map there, you can see a whole series of triangles which are historical surface exploration pits and samples for copper. And there's about 10 kilometers of known strike length of certain lithologies there at surface where there is copper mineralization essentially leaking out of the rocks. Now, we don't view that copper mineralization itself as the primary target, but what we see it as is the smoke that is leaking off a potential larger source somewhere at depth. So essentially we have this known situation of mineralized intrusions intruding into some overlying layered sediments that are showing widespread copper mineralization. To add to the picture, more recently, a PhD student in the area sampled and dated these intrusions as the exact same age as Anglo-American's significant Sakatti sulfide nickel-copper PGE deposit further south in Finland. And so it's been demonstrated that the geology of this Porsanger area is an extension of the same geological belt, and therefore what we are targeting here are massive sulfide nickel-copper PGE deposits. And to do that, we have just run a electromagnetic geophysical survey over the Porsvan and Karenhaugen intrusions, and this will pick up massive sulfide indications. Well, it will determine conductive units which may well relate to massive sulfides at depth. And this is an exploration model that's well understood. It's similar to Sakatti, but also other significant deposits globally, such as the Nova Bollinger project in Australia, or Lundin Mining's Eagle project in the US. So we're really excited about the potential of this area. The geophysics has been completed, and the results of that will be announced to the market, we hope, in 3 to 4 weeks. And we're in the process of permitting a maiden drill program in this area. That drill program, there is a little uncertainty around the timing of when it can be conducted. We're working hard to conduct it later this year in around September or October, but there are a number of variables that we're working with, and these include considerations around other land users. For example, this is an area which is used by indigenous Sami populations for reindeer herding, and there are certain periods of time where there are migrations through the area. In addition, we want to be careful not to cause undue damage to the surface when it's too boggy or wet. Therefore, we will be using a helicopter-supported drilling. And there is also a consideration that as the year gets on and winter sets in, there will be challenges around daylight hours and suitable flying conditions. We've recently received approvals for the use of helicopter, for the use of local water sources, for access to the area with all-terrain vehicles, and the final drilling approvals are currently sitting with the indigenous Sami Parliament and local municipality, who we are engaging very closely with over the previous months. So we're working hard to advance that, and in any case, we'll demonstrate the geophysical targets that will be drilled either later this year or early in the spring next year, based on those geophysical targets. So in addition to Pennycat and Porsanger, which we believe will drive some real excitement in the stock, particularly Pennycat, where we know so much about the deposit, we see that as really underpinning the value of Kingsrose. And we're confident that once we get to the point of drilling and are drilling out a resource that we believe will be potentially the highest grade PGE resource globally, that'll really drive significant interest and value increase in Kingsrose. At Porsanger, we have a really valid and exciting exploration target that we'll be testing over the coming months. However, given our substantial cash position and our capabilities as a team, we are continuing to look for another asset to bring into the portfolio. We have a range of strategic objectives in terms of what that looks like. The key here is looking for a project which I call it at that sweet spot where the initial discovery has been made, where there is ore grade material that is known and recognized, and there is a clear geological concept for how this could become a large and significant deposit. However, the drilling and the resource definition has not occurred, and we can do that and ride the value increase through that process. In terms of commodities, we maintain a broad sort of nimble approach, but the focus are these forward-looking green energy metals, so predominantly nickel, copper, and platinum group elements. But we are also keeping an eye out on some potential gold opportunities in the regions that we're looking at. In terms of jurisdiction, the primary focus is continuing to be Scandinavia, given we are establishing a presence there. However, we are also maintaining a more global search with continual due diligence of various opportunities underway. So currently we are assessing a number of opportunities. We have a dedicated team of geologists working through these. However, given the strength of our existing projects, we won't enter into a new project lightly. It will be on the basis that we believe it is a genuine company-making and significant opportunity. We believe we are really well placed to identify those. I think we've already done that with our acquisition of Element 46 and our new current projects in Scandinavia. And this is really based on the quality of our team as a board and management. We've been involved in numerous successes in a wide varying geology and jurisdictions globally. And that's demonstrated here in this image, where we note a number of the projects and the jurisdictions where our company has been and our team have been integral to either making the discovery or advancing significant projects globally. And, you know, there's a very well recognized theme that is becoming ever increasingly apparent, that there is a growing groundswell of interest in these critical metals that will support new technologies to decarbonize our energy supply. And it's quite astounding to see that still today, at least 84% of our energy mix comes from hydrocarbons. And so there is a long way to go. And you can see this is becoming very apparent in the approach of the major miners and throughout the chain of businesses involved in metals production. You can see the likes of BHP, Rio Tinto, etc., are very focused on these forward-facing minerals. I've mentioned this, but sustainability we see is good business. It's not just something that we should do or must do. It is something that we're pleased to do to the highest of our abilities, because we believe it is the right way to operate within our communities and also will lead to a more successful permitting and development path for the project. So our aim is to be recognized as a leading junior explorer with a very strong focus on the sustainability footprint of our operations. And this feeds into everything, including our project selection. And that, as I alluded to before, includes looking at projects that can be operated as potentially high-grade underground operations with a lower surface footprint, smaller throughputs of ore, smaller requirements in terms of infrastructure and processing, and therefore leading to a lower carbon footprint, more efficient and environmentally sustainable operation. And we're very engaged in this respect. For example, we have a full-time head of sustainability who is one of Finland's leading authorities in mining sustainability. She's Katarina. She is full-time with us and engaging with all of the various communities and also with some of the scientific and environmental initiatives that are underway in Europe. I won't dwell on the board of directors, but these points are noted here. And just finally, as I've already mentioned, the Wailingo project, which was the company's previous focus, is currently being divested. And we expect to close that sale process over the coming couple of months, which will further add to our already significant treasury and see us really well placed to drive forwards our strategy on the existing projects, as well as acquiring and driving forwards new projects that we think will lead to a very exciting future for Kingsrose. So thank you for your time. I will now hide the presentation, and I will be now just looking to go through the Q&A. So we have a series of questions that have appeared. Feel free to add to those as we go, and I will do my best to work through them. So first on the list here, what number of other acquisitions are actively being looked at, and how advanced are they? So I think, as many will understand, this is a process that happens internally and cannot be, much of this cannot be disclosed. So we enter into non-disclosure agreements or confidentiality agreements with other parties to review the technical and other information on projects to determine whether we are interested in pursuing a transaction. So we, I can say, are engaged in this process. We have a number of active confidentiality agreements in place where we are reviewing opportunities both in Scandinavia and elsewhere. It's a process that is difficult to be very specific around timeframes, because it really comes down to when we see an asset of sufficient quality that we wish to transact on it, and whether a transaction on acceptable terms can be agreed. One thing I will say is that now that our existing new projects in Scandinavia are well established and on a path towards drilling, this has allowed us to divert more of our time and efforts to this process. And there's a few aspects to how we're handling that. We have a team of geologists that are starting from an earlier stage on Scandinavia, where they are developing a proprietary data set of all of the historical known geology, mineral occurrences, and information within various prospective mineral belts in Finland, and then in reaching out into Sweden and Norway to identify opportunities that we might even stake ourselves or wish to transact on. And then outside of that, we have a more nimble team that are signing into confidentiality agreements and then assessing data of other projects elsewhere. However, the aim here, as I've mentioned before, really would be to just add one main additional asset to the portfolio, and it requires to be, as I've said, something that we strongly believe could be a company-making opportunity. Okay, I'm just going to carry on here. The next question: is the company's intention to see Pennycat and Porsanger through to development, or is the focus more to prove up a resource and sell it to a third party? It's a good question, and one that is going to be determined through the specifics of the situation. But in general, our aim here is, as an exploration company, is to discover and advance a project to the early development stages. And our hope is that an asset is of such good quality at that point that we don't really have much choice in the matter, that a major mining company will look at it as compelling enough to make a very significant offer to acquire it from us. So that is the primary goal, to discover and advance a project through that initial exploration and early development de-risking to demonstrate its value and look to exit through being bought out. However, some of the assets that we're looking at, our early stage views on it are that the capex requirements for putting them into production are not excessive. These are not, for example, multi-billion-dollar capex porphyry targets. These are higher grade operations that can be built for a smaller sum of money and are achievable for a junior company. So we can continue to advance these projects with the mix of capabilities in our project, in our team, to quite an advanced stage. But as I've said, the primary goal is that we would define something of such significance that ultimately the company is bought out. And those are the types of assets that we are focusing on. I don't believe there is significant value to be had from advancing a smaller scale mining project in the public market. I believe investors are looking for us to swing for the fences and make a discovery of something really spectacular that a major mining company would like to buy. I'll just move down through the questions. There's a question here on which commodities we would like to have exposure to. Do we have a specific focus, or are we commodity agnostic? We do have a focus, and this is primarily on these forward-facing critical metals of platinum group elements, nickel and copper. And I would say, given we have such a strong platinum group elements deposit in our hands at Pennycat, we're primarily looking at something that is nickel copper dominated. But given our expertise also in the gold space and the potential of the geology in some of these areas for significant gold deposits, we will continually be keeping one eye out on those types of opportunities. And just again, from the supply demand side, we see great fundamentals for these elements, nickel, copper, and platinum group elements. And I think it's important to note that although the primary use of platinum group elements are in catalytic converters, there are a number of things that we think will continue to support the price of these. So that includes the fact that the world will not achieve going fully electric as quickly as I'd imagine it hopes. And this will be a multi-decade process, especially in more developing countries around the world. And there will be a continued need for these elements to go into catalytic converters. And in fact, increasingly so as we bridge that gap to other forms of energy, there will be increasing requirements on the loading of PGMs going into catalytic converters to reduce emissions as much as possible. In addition, the energy solution that is probably receiving the most financing in Europe is hydrogen fuel cells, and platinum group elements are a critical element that will go into that. So that'll replace a lot of the demand that might drop off as catalytic converters are starting to be phased out. In addition, we see that supply constraints out of Russia and South Africa will have a major impact on the market, and see an increasing interest in sourcing these materials from countries such as Finland. Okay, moving on. Is it better to think of KRM as simply a vehicle for continuous M&A and asset disposals, or would we consider taking a project through development into production? I think I've hopefully answered that question earlier. We are looking to acquire a refined portfolio, so not just one asset. We don't hope to live and die on the success of one asset, but again, we don't want to dilute our focus unnecessarily. So we're looking to take on a refined portfolio of assets that we will advance to quite a significant level of development to then justify a significant price tag for an acquisition of that asset in the future. The next question here, can I provide any further background on the company that are looking to buy the Waylungo project? Yes, I can. First of all, I'd just like to step back and say that we followed quite an extensive process in how we approached the sale of Waylungo. Working with some third-party groups, we introduced the project to a wide range of potential buyers, and that is a list of in excess of 30 companies that were directly contacted, who we believed had the wherewithal and the potential interest to be a buyer for the Waylungo project. Various companies took various degrees of interest. We signed a number of non-disclosure agreements with various groups and provided data. This was then further reduced down to 4 companies who conducted detailed site visits on the project before indicative offers were made to the company on potential terms of a transaction. And ultimately, the group that we've entered into an exclusivity arrangement with rose to the top through their capability that was demonstrated. I appreciate not much is known in the public domain about them, but I can explain that this is a company that is a part of a wider group that includes the largest tire manufacturer in all of Southeast Asia, with very significant financial resources. They also operate a cement works, and importantly, another gold mine in Indonesia as one of the arms of their business. So we know that they have significant financial ability. We know that they have other existing mining operations in Indonesia and the capability to put Waylungo back into production. And being a Indonesian domiciled group, they also have significant experience and influence in the region at a political level that we believe also will assist in driving the project forwards. So a lot more will be made clear to the market on signing of a legally binding share purchase and sale agreement, which we hope to be executed in roughly 4 to 6 weeks. And at that point, an announcement will be made that a final and binding agreement will have been entered into, and that will disclose all of the financial transaction terms as well. Okay, I'm just going to continue down. There is a question here around our essentially capital allocation plans and budgeting plans for Finland, etc. Because I did lay out some potential budget numbers in a previous Crux investor interview. Now, as I alluded to in that interview, based on our current projections, we expect to be able to advance Pennycat to being drill permitted around this time next year and commence drilling in December next year. And then to take that through a maiden resource estimate and potentially a scoping study that will be following a second season of drilling for a total of roughly 12 million Australian dollars. In addition to that, we will have the ongoing costs of operating our business over the 2 to 3 year period and advancing Pennycat, which at this stage is through the geophysics, Porsanger, which is through the geophysics we've just completed, continual engagement with the communities, further geophysics and exploration on other areas of the ground, and culminating in a maiden drill program of somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 meters of drilling. Beyond that, further work there will be based on the results. And therefore, all of that I indicated in terms of just general operating costs and what we're spending on Porsanger and other business development initiatives will add roughly another 5 million to 6 million to the budget over the next 2 years. And therefore, we are looking at spending over the next nearly 3 years, roughly 20 million, which would leave us still with a buffer of our current cash balance of around about 5 million. And then in addition to that, the proceeds of the sale of Wailingo. So the reason I'm laying out some of those high level numbers, and I should caution that these are subject to change as the projects advance. But I'm laying this out because we believe that we can meaningfully advance Pennycat to a maiden resource and a scoping study, and we can adequately explore and drill test Porsanger and maintain an ongoing and active program of due diligence on other acquisition opportunities and operate the business for 3 years and still retain roughly $5 million in the bank, and that is before the proceeds of the sale of Wailingo. And therefore, what I'm trying to demonstrate is that we can meaningfully add value to our business by carefully deploying our capital on our assets to add value, which should be reflected in a significantly higher share price long before we need to raise further capital. Okay, I'm going to continue down through the list. What are our views and any contingencies on the geopolitical military threats to our projects in Scandinavia? I cannot be conclusive in my answer here. It is an evolving situation. However, my strong belief is that there is no significant threat to Finland or Norway and our assets from the ongoing conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Interestingly, Finland retains the largest artillery of any military in Europe and has and by virtue of its history and location has maintained very significant military capabilities along the border with Russia. And additionally, it's very challenging terrain in Finland, and the alignment of Finland with the EU and increasing alignment with NATO, I believe, would deter any interest from Russia in entering into a conflict, expanding into that region. So we really do not see a credible risk to our projects from the conflict that is currently ongoing. The next question is there any evidence on hand at the moment to suggest that Pennycat could extend beyond 500 meters depth? At present, there are drill holes down to roughly 300 meters that have hit mineralization in historical drilling. We've extended it down to 500 meters depth, which we felt was a reasonable and conservative level based on the known data. Bear in mind that we have demonstrated at surface many kilometers of strike length of mineralization. Now this is at surface due to erosion, so that surface level will represent varying depths within the original intrusion. So just that in itself, basically the extensive kilometers of strike indicates to us that there's every reason that you would have similar potential extents to depth. And again, based on other analogous deposit types in the region, globally, there is every reason to believe that it will extend significantly below 500 meters. And as I previously mentioned, there are seismic studies that have been done which show the intrusion extending anywhere between 1.5 and 3 kilometers depth. Has Kingsrose submitted its application for an exploration license at Pennycat yet? So I think, as I mentioned before, the situation we are in is that we must prepare what is called a Natura assessment that goes alongside our exploration license applications. So this Natura assessment is the combination of habitat and species surveys along with an exploration plan that demonstrates how the exploration is avoiding any sensitive habitats, and we're using techniques to mitigate and minimize any impacts on any sensitive habitats or species. This process was commenced by the previous owners of the project, but only on one area over the AP Reef pothole and a portion of the SJ Reef in the south of our project area. So because that area has been advanced ahead of the others, that will be getting submitted during August and will commence the roughly 10-month permitting process for that. In addition, we will be completing all of the surveys and have the Natura assessments ready to submit for the entirety of the rest of the area before the end of the year, which again should result in approvals around about October next year for those areas, which is in advance of the intended start date for drilling, which based on snowfall in the winter will be roughly December 2023. And I should also say that as part of that Natura assessment that we're preparing, we're working very closely with the environmental authorities who will ultimately approve it. So we've already taken the initiative to, in various stages along the preparation route of these documents, to present our findings and our approach to them, to receive guidance, and therefore hopefully have those documents in a shape that is acceptable and can be processed quickly by those environmental authorities. And again, I appreciate I'm working through these questions in order that they appear on my screen, so I'm jumping around in terms of subject. The next comment was, is there an average thickness for the reefs? You'll see there was a statistical analysis done as part of the exploration target work that was announced a few weeks ago, and it's noted there that the SJ and PB reefs average approximately 1.5 meters thick. At the AP reef, because most of the drilling was clustered in the much thicker ballroom, which resulted in intervals upwards of 35 meters thick, we have less clarity on the average width of mineralization at the AP reef, and that'll be determined through our own drilling. But on average, we're seeing on the other reefs roughly 1.5 meters width. Again, as we drill and sample a wider interval, this we hope will slightly increase. However, we see 1.5 meters as very much a good width that is at the upper end of a lot of the production that we see elsewhere, for example, in South Africa. Okay, the next comment is around rhodium grades. Sorry, I'm just understanding this question here. Were the average rhodium grades reported in the announcement for one rhodium across assays with a cutoff of 1 gram or a separate rhodium cutoff? So our approach here was that rhodium analysis is first of all is slightly time consuming and a significant additional assay cost, and therefore our initial approach was that once we received back the results of the other platinum group elements, platinum and palladium, any results that exceeded 1 gram per ton were then automatically analyzed for rhodium. So that's where we basically drew the line in terms of what we analyzed for rhodium. Based on those, on our work, we'll assess whether we continue with the same approach when it comes to drilling, or perhaps we will just more likely analyze for rhodium routinely on all samples. But the results were very encouraging, and I think as you will be able to see in our previous announcement, there were grades up to in excess of 2 grams rhodium, which is exceptional. But average grades on the SJ reefs were over 0.2 grams per ton, which at a rhodium price of roughly $18,000 an ounce is a really significant credit. And interestingly, over the past couple of years, rhodium in the projects, the South African bushveld projects, has accounted for about 40% of revenues there. And those projects are producing rhodium grades at between 0.1 and 0.3 grams rhodium. So we sit well within that and potentially at the upper end of the scale in terms of rhodium grade. The next question relates to how the downturn in recent markets impacts how we're looking at potential acquisitions. Has the price of potential acquisitions dropped, and have we decided to be more patient in our strategy? Yeah, a very good question. It's certainly factoring into our considerations. Essentially, as we see it, this is an opportunity for us. Not only are public valuations and by virtue of that, private valuations depressed, a number of companies will also find it more difficult to obtain financing to advance projects themselves. So this puts a company like ourselves with a good cash position in a very good spot to be able to offer terms that are of interest in a transaction on projects. So this we see as an opportunity. It's a buying opportunity for us. Therefore, we're doubling down on our efforts at the moment and increasing our focus on the search for another asset. But in addition, it does also, the current market downturn, encourage us to be patient for the right project. Also having in mind that in a market such as today's, even good news will not receive the attention that perhaps it deserves. And may therefore sort of be lost on the market. So there is, as we see it, we appreciate that then there's a need to be proactive and driving forward news flow and the development of the company. And as shareholders, yourselves and myself personally, I'm keen to see continued development. But at the same time, we recognise that in reality, the exploration and mining business is not a short-term business. It requires time and a strategic, patient approach. And we are in an enviable position where we can continue to drive forwards our strategy with our well-funded position and significant team to basically lay down the best fundamentals possible in terms of projects and how those are staffed and moved forwards to be really well positioned when markets improve. Another question, if Norway promises development, how would this be funded and when? Well, as I mentioned, we currently have enough funding to advance through the early exploration phases of mapping, geophysics, and early drill programs. As is typical, most exploration companies are equity funded in the earlier stages of development until we can essentially look at a feasibility study level of understanding on the project when debt financing or other financing opportunities might become available. However, essentially, we see that we have, with our current cash position and the proceeds of sale of Wailingo, a significant cash position and runway over 3 years plus to really add value to the project and therefore our share price long before we need to consider a capital raise and any dilution to the company. Another question here, what does the Audit and Risk Committee do? Have they flagged any concerns setting exploration budgets in light of Russian operations? Okay, so we have a very experienced board and also financial team. Our CFO, Mark Smith, comes from a significant background of being the CFO of the Centamin project as they built out the world-class Sukari gold deposit in Egypt, as well as he's worked for a number of other mid-tier and major mining companies. In addition, on our board, we have Andrew Cook, who is an experienced lawyer and company secretary based out of Sydney. And we also have the likes of Darryl Corp, who managed governance and business development for Newcrest. So we have, as opposed to maybe some other junior companies, a very highly credentialed board with experience of good governance. And this factors very highly in our operations of the company, and it's very clear in our board meetings. Therefore, we do have a risk committee, an audit and risk committee who assess any and every related party transaction and also assess our budgets for their applicability to the current business scenario and strategy of the company. And so this is a rigorous process that involves all members of the business and goes through a series of interrogations before anything is approved, and we're confident that our governance procedures are at a very high level. Where do I expect the share price to be late 2023? I'm afraid I can't give you a number there, but with our anticipated commencement of drilling, and we hope to have advanced Norway significantly, and we hope made a discovery there. Of course, our aim is for it to be significantly higher than it is today. And I think if you look at any, even in this depressed market, if you look at any comparable companies with slightly more advanced assets versus our enterprise value of less than $15 million above our cash, there's significant room for growth going forward. What is our position on obtaining potential farm-in, farm-out arrangements or joint venture arrangements on any of our projects, as opposed to selling the assets? Look, we will assess any transaction opportunity, based on its merits. However, I personally am not a fan, for example, of the prospect generator model as a primary strategy. I believe there can be a place for joint ventures in a couple of scenarios. Firstly, if it isn't a core asset, if the company needs to focus its time and efforts on a core asset that is showing the most promise, then secondary assets in the portfolio, it may be sensible to joint venture those and retain exposure while having another company fund and take the risk on those. In that scenario, I can see sense in joint ventures. The other scenario where I see sense in a joint venture is when it comes to development and essentially mine building and mine financing. If we get to a point where we believe so strongly in the project that the company and the shareholders believe it's not in our interest to sell the entirety of the business, there may be a strategy whereby we introduce a larger partner to co-fund and advance the project on a joint venture basis. And you'll see this done many times to great success globally. And I'll point you to, for example, Robert Friedland's Ivanhoe Mines. Robert Friedland, of course, one of the most, if not the most successful junior mining entrepreneur globally, and with significant financial resources, has still, in many cases, opted to bring in capable financing and technical partners to advance their projects to minimize financial risk and technical risk. However, predominantly our goal is to have belief and conviction in our own assets and advance those ourselves to benefit from the full value of those discoveries. Okay, well, that concludes, I believe, all of the questions that I've received here on this session. I hope everybody found the presentation and these questions informative. We'll look to host more of these sessions in the future as our projects advance, and we'll be posting a copy of this video to our website very shortly. So with that, I thank you for your time and interest in what we're doing. We are always on hand to answer any further questions should you have them, and we look forward to advancing Kingsrose and demonstrating some real value for our shareholders and stakeholders locally into the future. So thank you all, and goodbye.